Hi, I'm Lisa Anderson, President of LMA Consulting Group and host of Supply Chain Chats. And I'm thrilled to be here today with Michael Koeppel. We worked together once upon a time, and Michael is widely recognized for his work in business valuations and financial forensics, particularly in disputes, distressed entities, and complex financial matters, with experience that includes Citigroup venture capital, engagements across 34 countries, and distinguished service in the U.S. Army as a medical corpsman. Wow. Impressive background, Michael. And I'm excited to talk today a bit more about valuations, how they relate to manufacturing companies and the supply chain, and how all these topics interrelate. So maybe kick us off. Like, what are you seeing today, or what trends, or what would you like to start with?
Yeah, Lisa, thank you. It's always a pleasure talking to you and seeing you again. What I would like to do is we can talk about the focus on supply chain in doing business valuations, as well as analyzing challenged entity, either distressed in or out of bankruptcies. The supply chain is becoming much more of a factor than it was 15, 20 years ago. There's no comparison. Some of the problems are the additional risk that supply chain has caused. Business valuation is a function of the risk of obtaining your net working capital. Well, if the supply chain's in distress, part of it has to be with globalization, that the wave of globalization. The second part of it is this crazy scenario with the tariffs. And another part of it also is the labor shortage. There are certain industries where there's still significant labor shortage.
Yeah, those are really good points. Oh, go ahead.
And I like to believe that the last component of it is the manufacturing process has become much more complex. If they need a piece for the widget factory, they may be getting that either in China, Vietnam, or something like that. And as you know, the lead time can be 8 weeks. So you have a hiccup in that, the 8 weeks. And in the competitive market with the net cash flow, everyone trying to optimize that, it's very difficult now to have just-in-time inventory. It's very good theoretically, but in practice, it eats up a lot of your cash flow, and cash is king right now during these challenging times.
I mean, that's a really good overview. Maybe we'll take them one at a time. Are you seeing, the same trend as far as companies moving from globalization to trying to more regionalize their supply chain, or what are you seeing? It sounds like you're definitely seeing valuation impacts if you're dependent at least on one country, and probably China. Well, they should be.
What we're noticing is that the globalization is decreasing, especially for small, mid-sized companies. And you have to regionalize it in many cases because you want to be able to control your own destiny. If you have a problem with the shipping and logistics is a challenge all over the world right now with the product, for example, hypothetically coming from Vietnam, but if it's something down the street, you can more easily work with that specific vendor to address their problem and have heads up, and also have a better communication with regards to what the whole supply chain process looks like.
Yeah.
You see, part of it is it's not the vertical integration we saw maybe 25, 30 years ago. Everybody has a specific niche in it. Mm-hmm. That's profitable. You can't be all things to all people, but if you're manufacturing something and you don't control all the products, it's a risk. It's a significant risk. And you got to question yourself, do you want to control the entire vertical integration? That's just as hard.
It really is. I have had one small, medium-sized client that actually largely vertically integrated, and they were known for it, but it's really not easy. That was their differentiation, if you will. But vertically integrating as a small company is quite the challenge. Although there are alternatives, you do need to gain better control, like you're saying, I think, Michael.
Yeah, you can mitigate that somewhat by having dual sourcing. Uh, that's a possible thing, but you got to be careful. You only have too many dogs chasing the same rabbit. I mean, the profitability of it, you got to be able to keep your suppliers happy and able to buy the product. They don't want to be sharing it with the technology. And a lot of the product that you may need is a technology product, something that you need specifically from a manufacturer, and that's their differentiator, their added value of that, and another supplier may not have that. And also, as we just spoke about with vertical integration, where do you stop and where do you start? If you're going to
Right.
do the vertical integration and, for example, make widgets, where are you going to also get into the mining company that you can
Well,
make the metal
exactly.
manufacturing? Are you going to get into this? Are you going to get into electronics, the robotics, the wiring? I mean, where in the process do you start and end?
Right. To your point, the client I was thinking of is a lighting manufacturer, and they vertically integrated more than anyone else that I've seen, but by no means were they mining or, I mean,
Yeah,
that's just quite insane, really. I mean, even the largest companies don't vertically integrate to that degree, generally.
correct. No, because everybody has a value added process. There's certain things that they're good at throughout the entire chain of the product. Excuse me. And the other issue that's very common, you got to be realistic about it. The supply chain is a chain, and you're as strong as your weakest link. It doesn't take much, as we found out post pandemic, that it can really destroy. And the pandemic is acceptable. Everybody recognized it. It was a worldwide disaster. But after the pandemic, other companies getting back up and running and things like that, it was amazing on how long it took a lot of these suppliers to be able to fulfill their obligation to the customers.
Yeah, it really just is no longer acceptable. I mean, you're going to be passed up because you can find alternate sources. So, I mean, I think that is a really good point, is I'm seeing that you have to be able to respond quickly to changing conditions, and quickly is not, months, not
Yeah.
even days in many cases.
Yeah, and then the other challenge is you start going out and doing the dual sourcing and everything else that we're talking about, Lisa. You really have to start worrying about quality. You got to be comfortable with the products you're getting because the end product has your name, your brand stamped on it. You have to make sure that all the components are acceptable. And if you just willy nilly and go out and buy the product from anybody else, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. You have to do a significant amount of testing and verification with your suppliers. Now, if you have dual sourcing, which strategic is that, you got to double that amount of work. Now you got to do the quality control and everything else with them. Now, years ago, they had big emphasis from the automotive and aerospace with the ISO process and everything like that. Ironically, the whole thing was decades ago created by Chrysler, and they were one of the first ones to let that go. The bureaucracy and the characterization meant nothing. It was so easy to get stamped. All that really meant is that you document your process. Your processes could be crap, and your entire supply could be crap. But as long as they're documented, it was acceptable. I always thought that that was just a crazy environment in which we were working in.
I mean, it really is. I mean, it is quite crazy because some companies take it seriously, and they'll implement process disciplines and
Right.
make sure that the processes catch potential problems ahead of time. But many of them really just sign the form saying, "Hey, I documented this," but no one follows it, knows where it is, or anything like it, which is not great, to say the least.
And also the supply chain for the small and mid-sized companies is they're impacted so much by things beyond their control, whether it be inflation, the cost of the raw materials themselves, the supplier labor shortage, everything that you can think of. And the other thing now to add to the dimension of complexity is logistics.
Yeah.
Getting from one place A to place B, if it's international, has a whole set of challenges. Even in the North America, going from Vancouver, for example, to Iowa is can be an issue. You have so many of these things that you don't control in the logistics chain.
Yeah, that's very true. So, well, I guess that's a good question. Are you seeing, like, your more successful clients, what do you see that they're doing better than the rest, if you will, or to, obviously that all relates to getting a better valuation as well. I mean,
Well,
one
I
thing
think
I'm seeing is more strategic partnerships, but what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a true partnership.
Yeah.
Not just the treating them like a vendor or customer. You really got to have communications, work with them, have a rapport with them in the good times, the bad times, and times are ugly, and be realistic with them and their expectations. And you can't constantly beat your vendors up on nickels and dimes because they're getting caught in the inflation, they're getting caught in all these labor shortages, they're getting caught, and you have to recognize that, and you have to adjust for it in the price of your product and your product allocating. It's you can't keep beating up on the vendors for every little nickel and dime and say, okay, I'm making a profit. Well, you're putting them more and more at risk by doing that. And also, quite candidly, if someone is just breaking even on the product that they're supplying to you, that's not a good sign because one, they're not going to do it. You're not a high priority. And two, if something better comes along, they're going to jump on a new customer.
It's very true. And especially if you're dependent on them. So I'm seeing the same, like you have to be more careful about who your partners are, but you also, I mean, to some degree, aerospace, well, there's a lot of things we could say, good and bad, but one of the things that they've touted anyway, and that I see some of them doing, is they tend to support their supply chain partners, meaning like they'll go and like work with their suppliers to resolve issues in the supply chain. Because after all, if your supplier isn't profitable, like you said, well, first of all, your price can't get better without losing them. And, so it just go like you said, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So I don't know. Are you seeing like sharing of resources, if you will, like,
Yeah,
more
I'm seeing
partnerships like
of
that?
sharing of the resources and also have periodic meetings with them. I mean,
Yeah.
the big boys, the aerospace and defense contractors, it's a terrible thing to say, but I think it's really cost isn't an issue. Okay, you need so much for this, and okay, you just bake it into
True.
the cost and you roll on. But if you're a small, mid-sized company, say under $50 million, these factors are significant, and you got to be able to
Totally.
work at them. And it's a whole different dimension of complexity being able to work with your vendors. And there's nothing wrong with having a vendors meeting, sit down with them one on one, talk to them, let them know what your product is. Say, okay, here we are in a new year, a year from now. These are the changes we envision going on. And let them become part of the process. Don't give them a diagram and say, okay, this is what we want. They're true strategic partners in the component. They're going to add value to it. And that's what you want, someone to add value to it. Now, what maybe cost you a little bit more, but in the long run, it mitigates your risk significantly.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, Actually, when we worked together, I remember we worked with some suppliers to like develop materials together to like look at ways to reduce costs, but where we both could gain profit. So I think to your point, that's definitely one of the key strategies that would help in today's supply chain.
Yeah, and communication is very important. Let them know what's going on. I mean, I'm not saying you have to share with them all your financial statements and anything along those lines, but just sit down, show them, look at, here's what our product is. Here's where we're getting squeezed. Where can you help us make this a win-win scenario? Because they still want to keep the end customer as a customer. They want to say, and then you'd be surprised at where they can add value. And they
Yeah.
can say, okay, if you were to engineer the product, your widget this way, we could save you 10% because of X, Y, and Z. So, oh, okay, is it worth exploring? And that's what you want. It's
Yeah,
too often
absolutely.
people just call them and just beat them up on price, or I need another truckload or cab of the product. Need it next Wednesday. Well, be realistic with them. Let them know what your forecast is down the road, a real forecast. I know, Lisa, we saw this so many times. You give people a forecast, it's just pie in the sky. You
Yeah.
have a build up for your forecast, and then call them the day before. Oh, you don't have to ship it all now. Well, guess what? They put in all the cost and energy. They have to have some sort of business and to mitigate their risk as well. It's a true partnership.
Actually, you bring up a really great point because it's one of our favorite topics is the planning processes and sales, inventory, operations planning, in essence, meaning like how do we actually share material forecasts with suppliers, up and down your supply chain, really, in a way that's, more like, it's on top of changing conditions. And to your point, you don't have to commit, to 100% of everything up front. But if you're sharing information and you're working together on it, you have to build trust, to your point about relationships and communications. But it's, far better if you can get your supply chain elements working together. It really, the whole supply chain would be ideal. Do you see that?
Yeah, I
Do you see
think
that helping?
that's a good case scenario. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing it as much in practice as I should be. If you have a forecast, and every business should have projections and a forecast. If you don't, well, it's a whole host of other problems, another
Right.
whole group of podcast. But if you see, and if your next quarter is going to be, say, 10,000, let them know in advance. And because don't let them go week to week, because maybe they can make larger batch and save you some
Right.
money and share the cost of doing that. Or maybe if you give them enough lead time, they can do it from another facility where they're not at full capacity. There's so much that they can do, and they are your customers. They are so important, the supply chain, and they want to work with you.
I mean, you're absolutely right. With one client, we were doing PSYOP within their facilities, and exactly what you just said. We're able to move production between facilities and or resources in some cases short term, so that we could fill gaps, better utilize the high skilled talent they didn't want to lose, even if there was down months in certain facilities. At the same time, like, how do you support really growing and rapidly growing business when you don't have time to train somebody? It could take months in some cases with complex products. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I see looking across for opportunity, looking across systems, including internal and external, like customers, suppliers, is helpful. And in that case, there was actually also suppliers where we had to help figure out what the supplier capacity was, because they would agree to things, to your point. But if it was obvious they really couldn't produce it, that was going to be a
Yeah.
problem. So we needed to work together to figure out, like, what could you reliably send us so that we can, plan our facilities and make sure that, we can support the customer. So I think you're absolutely right.
No,
There's a
you're
lot of
right. And support
communication.
the customer. If you don't have a strategic alliance with them, if you say I need 10 million widgets, they're going to say, yeah, of course. Well, their capacity is only a fraction of that. You have to explain to that how do we going to get to this level, or how do we commit to
Correct.
this, and how do you work through that? But as we said before, though, I think the globalization is decreasing. We're seeing a lot more regional. You can work with people down the street who have the same characteristics and many of the same challenges you do. Uh, the currency fluctuation is going
Mm,
crazy outside the United States, and Canada and the United States are relatively stable, but all the other countries may not be stable, and you have to pay and accommodate for that. You have the
mm.
unbelievable challenge today of logistics. And if you don't plan logistics and you got to start freighting things on a plane, there goes your profitability geometrically. So you got to find a way to make this all work.
Very good points. And actually, I know you work some with medical device manufacturers as
I
well. Are
do.
you
I do a
seeing some?
significant amount of valuation work with medical devices and intellectual property. The challenge there is in a medical device is you got to make sure that all your business partners are compliant with the entire gamut of checklist that we have here in the United States. And that's very challenging for the supply chain process. They have to be certified and go through the
Yep.
rigmarole. Do they have to have this? All the other requirements that the United States requires for medical devices, especially if the medical device is going to be developed or made overseas. And Unfortunately, a significant amount of it is made overseas because the casting, the whole gamut of it is so expensive. It's very difficult to make it in the United States. But people are realizing that cost alone, I mean, is it the right product? Is it the right capacity of metal? A whole host of other things.
Right.
And the other thing we worked with is a few pharmaceutical companies, and it's amazing that the amount of the pharmaceutical world that comes from India and
Yeah.
Ireland. Ireland for
Mhm.
tax reasons and a whole host of other things, but the pharmaceutical, the big market is definitely from India, and you got to make sure and check on the products. And you can't be naive as the end customer and saying everything's okay. You have to go check out these sites, not only
Yeah.
for your own sanity, but for your own product and your own company. Treat it as if it's part of your product because it really is. Maybe it's not under your roof, but it's still a significant part of the product. And you have to be able to address that and take care of the people. It's becoming in the last 15 years, pre-pandemic, supply chain really wasn't a risk. Now, I can't think of any manufacturing company or even some other companies that we value and say, do they have supply chain risk? And you have to assess that. And they all have a certain degree of risk. And 2-3% risk factor built into valuation is significant. And
Yeah.
what is the risk and how they're going to mitigate the risk and what's the process of the risk? And if the owners of the company do it properly, it's a good roadmap to show them how to mitigate the risk. You come up with many of the ideas we talked about here, Lisa, and what can they do to mitigate that risk? Just because something worked 15, 20 years ago or pre-pandemic, it's a totally different world out there now. What are you looking to explore? Even if you don't change, you'd be
Yeah.
remiss in not exploring opportunities. Maybe you got the perfect format and everything else, and you're just the right place at the right time. God bless you. That's fantastic. But you'd be remiss if you at least didn't check it out, at least on an annual basis. Have someone like your consulting firm come in or have a valuation say, well, here's your risk. Here's how you have to do to mitigate this risk.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And I think things are becoming more complex to your point earlier. And also, it's just, I've been saying lately, it's just not as easy as it used to be. Not saying that it was easy per se, but it's just no longer going to be that way. I mean, there's just so many, there are just so many risks in the supply chain to be thinking about. And
Yeah,
it's, there's a high skilled resource gap.
the, I think overall, without focusing on any single market, and we can focus on several of the markets, is products are more complicated today than they were before. Let's be realistic. I mean, tools, everything's electronic now.
Yeah.
This is electronic. This has got a built-in app to it. This has got this. So the complexity of the product in and of itself is totally different than it was 15, 20 years ago. We don't even have to talk about the telephone over the last couple of years, how that's changed. I mean, that's an industry and a dynamic all to itself, but there's very little that hasn't changed. Maybe it's not as dynamically as that. And the other factor that's going to change this all, in my opinion, and spend a lot of time assessing this, is artificial intelligence.
Just going to ask you about that. So, what do
Yes,
you think about artificial intelligence and advanced technologies and how it will relate to valuations and supply
yeah.
chains?
Uh, you can do the risk assessment if you have all these products. Get the recipe, the ingredients of your product, of all the components, put it in there, and put in the cost. And AI today will tell you, okay, where are you in the market of cost? What are some other ideas? Now, don't do what AI tells you because AI is just a tool. You're not supposed to take that printout from the AI and say, okay, I'm going to change my manufacturer. Think about it. Take that information, work with a consulting group like yourself, and say, okay, what are the advantages of doing this? I mean, as we spoke a few minutes ago, if you did something 15 years ago and you're still doing it, it's probably wrong. I mean,
Is probably
things
very
have
true.
changed that much. And I mean, if you still have the old ERP system you had 15 years ago, God bless you. I mean, that's antiquated. I mean, things come so far, so long with the ERP system, with sales forecasting, product forecasting, planning, etc. And if you don't have those tools, Why? You got to ask somebody why. And they said, well, we're not big enough to have. Yes, the smaller you are, you want to automate this and make it easier and make it robust. It's you don't have to be a slave to technology, and just be careful that technology is the tool. Don't let technology lead your company, but use it as a tool. I'm not saying I don't know of any company, Lisa, that uses all the functionality, for example, of Oracle. They got
No,
tens
no
of
way.
thousands of them. It's like someone saying, well, I use Excel, I use all the formulas and functions. No, you don't. No one does. You couldn't. Even in a lifetime, you probably couldn't. But you
It's
find the
true.
tools and find the functionality that really needs and adds value.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, I think I hear the same. We're not sure. We'll have to put that into a couple of years from now. I'm not saying throw money out the window, but I think that the companies have to look at how do they automate in a smart way. How do they look at some predictive features and functionality, business intelligence reporting. I mean, you shouldn't be following fads, but they really need to be looking at how do they scale? How do they scale rapidly without adding armies of people that are going to be impossible to find anyway?
Yeah, no, that's it, the right skill set. But also the technology, the cost of it, ERPs, it's gone down geometrically. I mean, you
Absolutely.
can get a CRM system and pay, less than $50 per user per month, and you just, you pay for all the add-ons. But you can have these tools built into your process, so you hit certain thresholds, so you hit some predictability, quality control issues. All that should be water off a duck in today's systems. And if you're not really using that in manufacturing, it's an unnecessary, not only an unnecessary risk, and I don't want to keep it, you're jeopardizing your profitability. Maybe that's one way for someone to look at it. They don't say, well, I'm not worried about the risk. Well, okay, let's talk about how it's going to impact your profitability.
Right. And the customer experience, because the other
Yeah.
thing is that if you're struggling and you're slow, it's going to impact your lead times at minimum. But I see that it impacts like on-time deliveries, it impacts quality. If they can't perform the functions needed to even perform simple functions in many cases, it's quite the problem.
But it's interesting. You're absolutely right, Lisa. It's a entire chain, isn't it? Okay, you're taking care of your vendors and you're not doing the ERP or whatever software you have. What about your end customer? What are they going to think of you if you don't have the tools and processes in place? I mean, okay, you're taking care of yourself, but are you taking care of your customers? And that's what it's all about, isn't it? I mean, we all have clients and customers, and that's what we work for. I mean, you can't put them at an unnecessary risk.
Yeah, you want to provide you want to provide the right value, but you want to provide great value to your customers, grow your business in a way that's profitable. And that is not easy in today's
No.
environment and with all the complexity and risk that's going on. So, without some sort of thinking about the right tools and technology to support your business, I mean, I think we're going to separate winners from losers like almost maybe ever in history in the coming years here, because I don't see how, if you're not changing, I don't see how you're going to be
Yeah,
successful.
it's these are dynamic times, unbelievable. The thing that I'm always curious of is, a company will be doing very well, and they'll make sure they hire enough salespeople to take care of that end of the spectrum, but they're not taking care of the other end of the spectrum with regard to supply and everything else. They'll have some plant floor manager running around taking care of it. Well, it's a two-way street. You got to make sure the funnel is being properly prepared, and you also got to make sure the exit with the salespeople is properly prepared. You just can't just focus on the revenue side of it, the sales side of it, without taking care of the input side of the materials.
Well, of course, I completely agree. And I see that planning and PSYOP is really fuels growth, or profitable growth, really, because I mean, to your point, I've seen several custom manufacturers recently, rather than the last like 10 years, that's exactly the issue. Growing However, especially in customer manufacturing, you don't know what you have your forecast in dollars, but what does this mean in terms of, some products or at least critical products so that we can set up some key supplier agreements. We can look at capacity to your point. Otherwise, all that happens is you continue to extend lead times, make unhappy customers. They're like, why can't you predict? The finance folks or the private equity folks are saying, why can't you predict what you're even going to sell this month? It sounds
Yeah.
like it'd be easy, and it's like not easy.
And,
So that's exactly
it's
right.
it's not easy. Running a business today, especially manufacturing in the United States, is not easy. But you also have to have some reality checks in there. If you're in an industry that everyone predicts is going to be 7-8% growth per year, don't put down 20 unless you've got some super solid contract reason to do that. Don't just
True.
juice up the net cash flow in your projections. You're just disappointing everyone. And the
Totally
challenge
agree with
is
that
with
as
the
well.
small, yeah, the challenge is with the small, mid-sized companies, as I found doing this for a few decades now, is entrepreneurs are unbelievable optimists. They have a
That's
terrible
true.
month. They think they're going to catch up in a quarter. A terrible quarter. Okay, I'll get it by year end. And it's just the nature of the DNA of the entrepreneurs as a whole. You got to be realistic, and someone's got to sit down with them. And usually, sitting down with them realistically comes from an outsider. If
Yeah.
someone's got to come in there, and they have to have a business partner. And I'm a recovering CPA, so I can tell you that's not the path to go. They usually tell you the facts after. The horse is already out of the barn. When they
Right.
prepare the balance sheet and the P&L, okay, they can tell you what went wrong, but it's too little too late. You need a strategic partner who come in there and can guide you to mitigate all these risks that we've been talking about. And that's and if they don't avail themselves to it on a regular basis, shame on them. The best
Yeah.
customers we have are the ones we meet with informally quarterly. You say,
Yep.
okay, this is happening. We're having a problem. I need a new chief operating officer. We'll plan to get somebody. We work together and collaborate and point them in the right direction, the pros and cons of all these decisions. It's an informal board, if you will, and it works very well. Too many companies don't avail themselves of that, though. They think they have the solution.
Well, I mean, you're completely right, and it actually relates to several of these topics we've been talking about. Is sometimes clients say, "Well, you know what? I'm too small, I think, or I don't have enough information to start this, like we'll call it like forecasting and planning process." But you can always start somewhere. Get something that's directionally correct. If you have your monthly or quarterly cadence, depending upon what's needed, and in some cases even weekly. And you're asking the right questions. I mean, after all, if you're not meeting, you can see further into your pipeline. You can look to see what's happening, question, and there's a lot of ways, like you said, we could talk about it for quite a while. But you need to stay on top of what's really happening and changing conditions. And then, but you also have to you have to know when to take on a little bit of risk, I guess you could say, or make sure that you're prepared. So it's if it was easy, I guess everyone would be successful.
Look, that's just it. There's no excuse now for the mid-sized companies now. Maybe 20 years ago, if you had to have an ERP system, you're talking 7 digits and you got to install and do it. There's some great tools out there that are hundreds of dollars that can help you do the planning and put the effort into it. And there's a lot of AI interfaces that can help you do that. For example, if you're saying, I'm going to sell 10,000 of these widgets, well, what does that mean? The AI can just populate. That means you need this, and your average lead time is Y. Your capacity is this. You don't have to go to a Harvard Business School now to make yourself available of all these tools and get meaningful results. You really don't. You just got to put in the effort. And the biggest effort, as we all know, is people have to be willing to change. And that's the dynamic of all of us, to accept the change and realize it's time to do something else. And maybe the dilemma and everything with AI is forcing that. Just like, early in life PCs, and who had ever thought everybody had PCs? Well, everybody has multiple PCs. You got your phone, you got this, you got that. So now and now the next tidal wave is artificial intelligence. Whoever thought that you'd be able to do all this stuff for artificial intelligence? it's available to everyone and it costs nothing.
Yeah, it's to your point, it's going to transform industries. And I see too that, like, especially as, like, demographically we have baby boomers retiring, and there's just not the high skilled resources out there. We're going to need to be able to utilize these types of tools. To your point earlier, don't rely on them and do it exactly what they say, because that would be horrible. I mean, you have to think about things like, at least I think, you think about them like 80-20. Does this make sense? I mean, I can't tell you the number of times we've done, like, even a forecast and, like, crazy numbers come out, or a capacity plan, and everyone's like, oh, okay, this makes, let's do this. I'm like, do you realize this is like twice what you normally do? Or I don't know, some, really dramatic changes that, like, for some reason no one catches on to, or they don't look at a total. It sounds really obvious.
Yeah,
but
it's the adage is true: garbage in, garbage out, and you have to go through and utilize these tools, and I work with people who can help you utilize these tools. I'm not saying you have to know everything about it, but there's people, like your firm and other people out there, you go and say, okay, this is my situation. I'm $20 million. I make this kind of a widget. Here's my current client base. I would like to expand that. How can we do this and still be profitable during the transition period? That's the kind of conversations companies should have.
Absolutely. Well, I can't believe time, like, flies by every time we talk. Is there anything that you can think of related to valuations, or key aspects you're seeing come up from the supply chain that we should close on?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is we talked about a lot of good thing in the podcast is have a thorough understanding of where you are. Put a stake in the ground. The only way to do that is to have an accredited independent business valuation to show you this is where we are. And then when you go through the proper business valuation, we'll show you the risk, how to improve that, what are the dynamics to get you to X or 2 times X, and what are the risks to do it, and what you should do. What's it going to look like from a cash flow perspective? That's a great tool from which to launch all these initiatives that we talked about. First, you need to have a stake in the ground as to where you are today.
I completely agree. And by all means, you'd be smart to contact Michael for that process. I can't tell you the number of contacts and smaller companies, small, medium-sized companies that are like, okay, I'm ready to sell, but they have no idea what their business is worth. And to your point, they could double or triple what they get back from their company if they put a little effort into making some key changes. But you have to know where you are to do that. So I completely support that.
And sometimes you'd be surprised those changes are not that significant because you have a multiple. You do something, you save 20% of your cost. Well, you have a multiple of that. That's a significant number when you're done in the next valuation.
It extrapolates out, to be sure. And it's to your point. I mean, actually, I would say the majority of consulting projects, we're doing a tweak here, a tweak there. The key is which tweaks and how do you tie them together in a way that's successful. But it's not, we live by, like, there's always something you can do to improve the customer value and the bottom line on a quarterly basis. So like, just pick the first thing, keep moving forward. And to your point, your value will increase.
Excellent. Lisa, thank you so much. Have a great day, and I appreciate this.
Yep, thank you. I do as well, and we'll see you in the future.